Hi guys, Paul here at Radio Shop Pickups in South Wales again, and thanks for joining me in this video, which is Guitar Soldering 101 Part 4. And I'm going to be looking at this area here today. So I've got my soldering iron on and it's ready. I've got my solder and I've got my sponge. And if you've seen the earlier parts of the videos, don't worry if you haven't, because I'll put some links up on the screen. But in part 1 of this series, I went through tinning, and I went through just basic solder technique. In part 2 then we looked at soldering to the top of a pot, of this sort of joint here, and we also looked at attaching a capacitor to the top of a pot and also soldering through a lug. And then in part 3 we looked at the Strat switch tip, and now we're going to go on to another thing which you'll come across if you are installing Stratocaster pickups. And anybody who's done this will know that this is a little bit tricky, because you've got to solder 3 ground wires to the top of the volume pot, and it's a bit of a juggling act really, because you'll easily get one in and perhaps you'll get 2 in, but the third one will want to leave the joint as you're heating it up, and it's really a bit of a juggling act trying to get all these 3 to actually stay within a good joint, because as soon as you reheat that joint they just start popping out everywhere. Okay, so we'll go through a couple of tips with that, and what I'm actually doing this in is quite an interesting guitar really, because this is a loaded ID Crispbuck pickguard, and it's going into a Squier Strat that's going to be featured in an upcoming video on the Buck and Evans channel, so check that out. And basically we're going to take a Squier Strat and improve it by putting our pickups in, hopefully to sound better than a custom shop Strat. Now I'm going to start off by sort of de-installing, okay, because I'm going to desolder these 3 ground wires, right? So I'm just pretending really that I'm taking these pickups out, but actually I'm just going to desolder them and then put them back on and just show you going through that. Now, to get enough heat going, I mean, obviously one of the things that people do is just put the soldering tip there, and it's not quite enough heat then. So what you've got to do is you've got to tin the tip of your iron, and now we've got lots of heat to actually heat up that joint. And as you heat it up, just place it on the joint and these will come away. Okay. Now obviously one of the things that you've got to be aware of is the angle of your soldering iron, because if you tuck wires away so that they're out of the way, because you can easily, say for instance you had this wire there and you're trying to solder there and you turn around, especially with plastic wires, and you've actually caused a problem, or you've melted through, or even these will have little sort of brown scorch marks. So if you can, where possible, tuck wires out of the way. Now in part 1 of this video I did a lot about tinning, so check that out, but I'm going to show you tinning again. Now these have actually got enough solder on them to reattach now, but imagine that you had a bare wire, you'd have to tin them. Okay, so see part 1 for that, but I'll just show you very quickly now. I've just cleaned my solder iron, so I do that between every joint, or every bit of tin I do, and we're just going to put a little bit of solder on the tip, take it to the wire that we're looking to tin, then when you've got it there resting against it, you can then add solder to the wire, because the heat of the solder will go to the melted solder. Now this is what I do then following that. I go to this one and I'll just heat up the solder that's on there, just a little bit, not a huge amount, and that's in place. Go to the next one, put it alongside. Now I can, you do build up a bit of tolerance, but there's actually a little bit of heat coming through. What you can do is hold it further away, but the more soldering you do, you will actually build up a bit of a tolerance to a bit of heat, but really it's not good practice, I suppose. So the best thing to do would be to hold it a little bit further away. Now this is where we get to the problem really, because I want to add a bit more solder and make it a better joint there, but when I do that, one of them, at least one of them, maybe 2, maybe even all 3, will decide to just detach and come away. So it's a bit of a juggling act, but what lots of people do, personally I would just hold these with my finger and thumb there, my left hand, then add the solder. Some people use something wooden, like a lollipop stick, or maybe even a cocktail stick, to hold those down, because obviously wood is not as good a transfer of heat, or conductor of heat. But I'll show you how I get the solder on, and then we'll look at that in a second. So what I do is I'll give it a little clean again, and I'm just going to get a little bit there, because it's possible to add a little bit of solder without getting it so hot that the whole joint melts. There you go. Now I'll put a little bit of a pause in there now, because one of the things that can go wrong with soldering is that people spend a long time with a lot of heat working on one area, and this is where you get to the problem where perhaps you can get some problems with frying the components and frying the pot and causing damage. So if you find that you're working on an area for a long period of time, and you're having a go at doing a solder joint and it's taking time, then obviously the area is going to be red hot. So it's a good idea to allow a little bit of time for the heat to dissipate and then have another go at it. Because sometimes not every solder joint is successful first time, and rather than just cracking on and persevering to get it right, you'd be better off giving a minute or so, just a little bit of time for the heat to dissipate. Now hopefully I should be able to touch that. Yeah, I can touch it, but about a minute ago that would have been red hot, so I've just allowed a little bit of time for it to dissipate. Now there's enough solder on there, but I'm going to I'm just going to put a little bit of solder on the tip there, and I'm going to hold these three together as best I can, and really I'm looking to make a really shiny pool solder. So I'm actually pressing the soldering iron down now, and that's great. Now sometimes the one at the edge wants to come away and you've got to redo it, but again you'd leave a bit of time now, because that probably, I'll just touch the top part, it's pretty hot, okay, so I'd leave a little bit of time and have another go at it. And if you need to add a little bit of solder, then that would be a good idea as well. Okay, there's quite a lot of solder, but I was starting not with a brand new pot, but with a pot that already had solder on it. So it is a choice. Sometimes you can actually desolder a little bit, but that's basically soldering multiple wires to the same joint on the top of a pot. And again, you could use a lollipop stick to hold these three down while you're heating the solder joint. That's a good idea, but I like to just hold them there like that. So that's part 4. Now in part 5, I'm going to move on with this loaded pickguard. I'm going to look at the jack, and then part 6 I'm going to look at soldering to the trem claw. So join me for those parts. Thanks guys.